So I'll call the meeting to order at 5:33. And first, are there any adjustments to the agenda? Anyone?
I don't have any.
No? Okay. Move on to the last meeting's minutes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of August 12th.
All right, I'll second that. Comments? Nothing? No? Me neither? Okay, been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. And new business. Jeez. Loan document for Backhoe borrowing.
So I sent out a letter to People United and Merchants Bank to see what they had for a financing offer for a 5-year note. Merchants Bank came back at 1.95% and People's Bank came back at 1.8%. So I went with People's and he produced the loan documents for tonight for the board to approve and sign.
So I'll make a motion that we accept the capital equipment note in the amount of $80,000 for the purchase of the backhoe from People's. Right?
Finance?
Yeah.
Yep.
I was weird because you said the purchase of the backhoe from
From
People's.
People's.
That
Right,
confused me.
yeah, sorry.
But I got it now.
Yeah.
I know what you meant.
Accept the capital equipment note from People's in order to purchase the
There you
backhoe.
go.
All right, I second that. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Could you sign in on that, sign-in sheet over there, please? Thank you.
All right, so Putney Inn, the request to release bond payment for municipal water and sprinkler connection charge.
So in your packet, which I'm assuming we knew this was coming based on the last discussion that we had from the owners of the Putney Inn, that they are requesting to be released from the bond payment for the municipal water system. They are on reservation only right now. They are connected only to our water system for their sprinkler system, and they plan on using their well to supply the rest of the business with the water supply. So we asked them to write this letter, and in the meantime I did send out a list of accounts with different statuses on those accounts, and so that we could compare, because I know one of the questions was, have we done this before? You know, what is the history and the precedence on this? And it was a little bit of a difficult list for Laura to put together, so I'm going to go over it. When the water system was put in place, you could sign up for reservation only or a connection request. So on this list are the people that requested one or the other of those options, but have still not connected to the system. The 3 accounts in the middle, the Warner, Alice Mays, and then JD's, those are the 3 properties that had, after they paid what they owed up to the date that they were being billed for, they were released from their reservation. They no longer have an allocation to the system. If I say something that you don't agree with, it's okay to tell me to stop, okay? So at that time, there were other accounts that were on, they had a bond payment plus the operation and maintenance fee because they had requested to be connected right off. They then came in, which are the ones that are, it starts with Putney Lodging all the way down to Basketville. They came in and at one point were moved to reservation only. No longer were they being charged operation and maintenance. Then the ones down at the bottom those are still being charged for both reservation only and operation and maintenance. So we've got different statuses for several people that are still not connected to the system. The ones at the top, they have been asked if there was this one-time opt-out.
We did that one way.
Right, there was a, right.
Surrounding this.
But the rest of these people have not been given that option to opt out.
You sure?
Yeah, we're sure.
Any particular reason that we're aware of, or?
I think because the only ones we gave the opt-out to were the ones that were reservation only at the time.
Gotcha.
So the ones that had asked for a connection, which I don't know if there was a time frame given on that at the time, that if you ask for a connection, you have to connect within a certain, but obviously we've got some people that are in that status of waiting to be connected for one reason or another and have never connected. So at the very least, I think we need to move over the people that are on operation and maintenance that are getting charged for that over to reservation only, to get everybody that is not connected right now on the same level playing field.
Or we should encourage them to connect, and if they don't want to connect, move them to reservation only. I mean, we should,
Well, I think that move them to reservation only and then send a letter out and ask these people what their intention is.
Right.
Because we should be stopping the operation and maintenance charge.
Right.
They're paying that with no benefit.
Right.
So that will get us all at the same starting point. Then they can choose at that point. I'm assuming that most of them will stay, at least tell us what their intention maybe is if they have a plan within the next however many years or a year or what. I don't even know if we should put a limit on it. I don't know. But at least it will be a conversation with them again as to what and I think they'll stay. I think they'll stay on reservation. They've been paying for years. But at least we'll have a good starting point to where all of our accounts are. So I know that doesn't directly relate to what the question is that the Putney Inn is asking, but there is precedence for releasing somebody from that reservation only. Now, Laura did kind of an analysis of if we drop the 24 ERUs, what will that do to our rate? And right now it's not going to do anything. It's very minimal. And my guess is that once we do this part of it and really get a handle on it, we might even be able to drop the rate a little bit for everybody, because right now it is a little high.
Right. Have you had this conversation with Scott at all or not?
I have not. Well, no.
I'm just wondering whether, I would be tempted to basically put their payments on hold until we can have a full board.
The other thing is that the next, I have a training September 18th about budgeting, rate setting, and all of that up in Montpelier with rural water. So, there might be something that comes out of that as well.
Okay.
Is this going to hold Putney Inn up?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, if you're going to suspend kind of I would suspend it. I wouldn't do it for the quarter we're in now.
Suspend it for the quarter, for the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Because they didn't ask for this until
or second quarter, which is it?
What
schedule is it on?
It's
Anyway,
a fiscal year.
September.
So this is the first quarter, so the second quarter.
October, November, December.
We might have it settled by then anyways. We might,
Right,
Scott, we might have
right.
that conversation and.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. I guess I would suggest that we suspend. So, should we do it as of today through the end of the year, or have they already paid for
No, they
the
haven't.
current quarter?
No, because we haven't
It's
billed
been
them.
paid through June 30th.
Yeah.
So you
We don't
could do
bill
it
for
as
this
of today,
quarter.
prorate it for this quarter.
That's what I would think might make sense, or the date of,
I would do it the date of the meeting.
yeah, because that's when we discussed it.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion that we suspend the billing for the Putney Inn bond payment as of today's date, the 26th,
Yeah.
through the end of this fiscal year, or through the end of this calendar year, and/or until the issue is resolved.
Which I think my guess is we'll have this resolved before we do the next billing,
That's fine.
because
Yeah.
it's July, yeah, so we don't bill until October,
Okay.
so. Did you
Okay.
guys vote on that?
No, so I'll second that. Any further discussion? No, okay, moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Okay, so then that leaves the question, and I don't know that this really needs a vote, it's just more of a, an administrative, well, I guess I would want to vote.
Moving these.
Are we moving these to reservation
Reservation only.
only, and then moving ahead with a letter to these account holders, get in contact with me, what is your intention with connecting to the water system, and having that conversation. I don't necessarily want it to be, this is an opt-out letter, but let's just get together and try to figure out where we are.
Well, I think the other thing that I would like it to be is almost more like an opt-in letter. And I don't know how we would figure that out, but, basically a letter saying, this is where you're at, we'd really like you to be connected to the system, because we really need to clean this all up. So, I don't know, I think we'd have to
Yeah, okay.
look at how we would structure that, and I don't know whether we wanna, again, I'm not sure whether that's a decision just the two of us should make, or whether Scott should be involved. I don't see any reason why he would disagree with
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I know him and I have had some conversation, and I don't think that,
He's not gonna, I guess it would just be a matter of how to structure that letter in a way so that we're not either saying,
the only issue I have is that we did offer it to other people. And I'm
so
a
maybe for
little
these,
bit,
so maybe for this group of people, we do that, and I guess that's all you're specifically talking about anyway.
is moving them to reservation only.
Right, move them to reservation only, but if we offer to opt out, I don't know why we didn't offer it.
Because they weren't reservation only at the
Oh,
time.
right,
Their
okay.
form said they were gonna connect.
Right, well, so we need to follow up and
Yeah.
find out why they haven't, so.
Why don't we, if you can approve moving them to reservation only, I will contact each one of them individually before we even do a letter.
And see.
And just have a conversation.
And
with each one.
then maybe,
It's not that many.
and then maybe look at what that letter might look at, and, I mean, I think it would be nice to, I guess if people are gonna stay on reservation only, then they're gonna stay on reservation only, but it would be nice to sort this out and get people either on the system or
Yeah,
not
it's
on the
just,
system,
yeah,
so.
and I understand, I know one that just connected recently within the last year, it was a huge expense for the engineering.
Well, and they've been paying over time,
Yeah.
so, no.
No, I
and-
mean just for the connection.
Right,
part of it,
right, yeah.
And that's what stopped most people, don't you think, Laura, is just the physical getting that work done. So,
Yeah, I guess it's, for me, it's just a question if there's any way we can,
encourage the
yeah,
connection
or
faster.
organize one engineer that does it all and gives a discount or
Well, and
something,
maybe
something
that's,
along those
maybe
lines, I don't know.
that's why I need
but-
to make the initial personal contact.
Right, see what the scoop is and
So that I
why.
can find out what is holding you up.
Yeah.
And then if there's 10 of them that say, the cost is too much.
Prohibitive, right, then we figure
then-
out whether there's
then
something we
we'll know.
can do to
Yeah,
help with
yeah.
that. right.
But at least if we can get everybody that's not connected at the same,
Yeah, that makes
then
sense.
that's a good starting point.
So I'll make a motion that those who are currently billed for reservation and operation be moved into reservation only.
Yeah.
Okay, second. Any further discussion? Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And this is everybody, right?
That is everybody that's
That's
left.
Who's
Right.
part of the system but is not connected.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Appointment of Affordable Housing Committee members.
And,
There's a list in there.
yeah, did all of these people
They did
agree
not.
or did not
They did not,
agree?
because we didn't get the letter out until Monday, but, Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust really would like to try to
Yeah.
get, so what I thought is we would go ahead and
And appoint them, and
point,
then
if
if they don't
somebody
wanna
says they
be.
don't wanna be, then
Yeah.
we'll take them off the list.
Okay.
Does that sound okay?
Make a motion, I guess, can I make a motion of appointing myself? I'll make an emotion that we appoint the following members to the Affordable Housing Committee: Jim Oliver, Pitt Bannister, Mike Mrowicki, Rebecca Coffey, Mark Schleffer, Kim Foltz, Lisa Papazian, Mal Herbert, Francis Temple, and myself, and for a one-year term.
I'll second that. Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. A little narcissistic in your face?
Yeah.
Do you wanna go call Tom?
The
and
Donald
see
and
what
I.
he is?
Yeah, that's.
Tom's here.
Oh,
Tom, somewhere. Oh, there he is. I saw him come in.
Okay.
you are sly.
He's a.
I was just
he's a
gonna
quiet-
text you and then I
he's a
thought, no,
quiet
I
little
shouldn't
flower.
text Tom in here. Sorry, Tom. I'm gonna be a little louder when you come in. Because we can probably skip the highway, just if you
Yeah,
wanna juggle it a
and
little
same
bit.
with Putney Safety Committee.
Well, that's just appointing a couple
That's
members.
true.
I don't know if you wanna just quickly do that.
Sure.
Sure, and
It's Eric and Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they sent a letter to me, asking to be appointed to the Public Safety Committee, Eric McGowan and Mark Fellows.
Make a motion that we appoint them to the Public Safety Committee. Mark and Eric.
McGowan, yep, I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So now,
Okay. Do you want me to?
Is this why folks are here, or do we want to?
We're Hendricks, but we're
I
neighbors.
say you're probably here for Hendricks, right?
Yeah, we're the abutting neighbors for
okay.
Nat.
We have people here for our
For the-
discussion.
Oh, that's nice.
Right, no, I know you're butters, good, I'm glad. We haven't had anybody come to these discussions yet, so I'm glad. Good.
We don't have any heavy agenda, we're just, you know.
So can we have our fire department staffing issue discussion first, or are you in a hurry?
No, we're fine.
Sounds good.
So back in December, Tom gave us a memo basically explaining some staffing issues at the fire department, and I think everybody's had a chance to read the memo. I think maybe since he's here, do you want to just kind of jump in and voice your concerns and then have a discussion about it?
In essence, at the end of the day, as I've said before, and as previous chiefs before me have said for a number of years, at some point we've got to have the discussion about what's really going to happen, because the system that's in place, it's not working well, and it's not going to continue to work. It's just that simple. So I'm wondering when we can start to have the discussion. I know there's no clear-cut answers. I know it's going to take a lot of work to get to the end, but we've got to get started, because again, the way things are, it's not going to last.
Right. I know that, particularly with the, now the new appointments on the safety committee, that's a discussion that we need to work on quickly.
Yeah.
I guess one question I would have is, what's changing these days that is different from other days? Or this year that's different from previous years?
Well,
That's,
the reality is, it's not this year versus last year versus the year before. When Brad King was chief, he was saying it. When Bill Weston was chief, he was saying it. The current system, which doesn't vary a great deal from what it was several years ago. It's not working. We're barely getting by, and it's not just here, it's everywhere. We've got to collectively figure out how we're going to maintain. Specific to this year versus last year and previous years, every year our call volume's increasing.
Okay.
Every year we lose people. Over the last 8 months, 9 months, we've gained a few people. And some of the folks that were existing, they've moved out of town. They've taken full-time positions in either law enforcement or the fire service in other communities. So even though they're still with us technically, their availability has decreased dramatically. So that's where we're at. I just my big goal is to at least get the ball rolling. That's the only agenda I've got. And to dispel some rumors that are apparently floating around out there that Cynthia let me in on, the reality is this: I don't have any agendas, except in the big picture to figure out what's going to work and how we're going to get it implemented. That's the only agenda I've got, because we very simply cannot keep going the way we are. It's not sustainable.
Okay.
So that's the only agenda I've got. Other than that, I'm wide open as a department head. I'm wide open to anything. So.
And we're talking, basically, we're talking staffing.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, as you know, Tom, from discussions we've had before, I mean, I think we could do more in working to recruit volunteers. I don't know that that's going to solve the issue. And I'm sure there are many who would say it's definitely not going to solve the issue. But I do think that there are departments out there that are doing a better job than others at getting volunteers and retaining volunteers. And I don't know how we, to me, having been down to discussion at Rescue, I asked the same question of Drew down at Rescue, because they've got, 20 full-time paramedics and 20 roughly, these are roughly, 40 some odd paid staff and 12 volunteers. When I was at Rescue 15 plus years ago, it was probably the opposite of that, I would guess.
As it has been in a number of different places.
I asked Drew, I said, is that, what's going on with recruiting, and or, is this just the reality of what we're facing? And I honestly think it's a combination of the two. I think that there's a lot of that reality that we are facing. It's difficult to find people. It's difficult to ask them to do the training that needs to be done. But I guess I do feel that within our department, we could be doing more to do that.
In reality, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I do what we can.
Yeah.
I know I put it out there every single chance I get that we don't have enough people.
Yeah.
And we need more.
Yeah.
There's some reality on the other side of that. Things that occur when people come forward, and I can go into that now, or I can wait and go into it with
probably a public safety committee type thing. Yeah.
It's not that we never get a knock on the door. Some of those folks that come forward, they actually work out and they're here. Other ones, once we actually get into the process that's involved, they don't pan out.
Yeah. And of course, that's expected in any volunteer
Right.
organization. Right. Yeah. I guess my feeling would be that at a minimum, we should be increasing the volume coming into that funnel.
Yep.
And if we still don't end up, because regardless of where we go going into the future with this, I think that recruiting and retaining volunteers should be a big and important component of that.
I know it's
difficult.
Right,
but-
I don't see that we could really do it any other way, but to keep that.
Certainly, for a significant
In
volume
the
of it.
mix,
Yeah, yeah,
How long that would go, I have no idea.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I guess
we can
that,
look back at history and kind of make a projection, but, you know, as we get together and start to brainstorm some things, we may find that, no, there is a different avenue here that we could take.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, actually, myself being on the safety committee too, I mean, I'm curious because I don't know, I don't know the recruiting techniques or any of that stuff. It would be, I think for all of us in the safety committee, even though I know some are more familiar with it than others, it would be great just to hear what all happens.
right.
And then, be well informed to take it from there.
Sure.
And I would, now that the committee is full, I imagine that hopefully, we got, BCA meetings coming up. But hopefully by, mid-September, we can get something going.
Well, and what I've told Tom is in the next 3 or 4 weeks, I'm going to just be reaching out to other departments, other, just what's working for you guys, what's not working, and try to come up with, because like I told him that although he sees people or he may be talking to people, I'm not sure that the general population, and that's why this is good to start this conversation here at a select board meeting. I don't know that the general population really understands that that volunteer, what the situation is
Yeah.
and what the level
Right.
is that we need, and asking people what their concerns are, or if you have gone and thought you wanted to do it, what stopped you from doing it? So I'm going to start asking those questions. One thing that Tom and I talked about it was brought to me at one point was a junior firefighting program, because we all know that it's really difficult to get people to come in, you get them kind of hooked when they're younger. One of his concerns was the insurance portion of it, and I've checked with our insurance company, and they're treated as a firefighter. There are federal regulations for junior firefighters, certain age groups, what they can do. And it's all about who do you get to organize that and manage a program like that. I mean, you guys know how I am in the summer with trying to get paid lifeguards at the pool. It's not an easy task, and you need somebody really dedicated to do that. So I don't think anybody's opposed to it. It's just how is that going to happen realistically, and managing it and making sure that it's being run properly, and because I told Tom the other day, you can't do everything. That's why I had to hire a pool manager.
Right.
You can't do everything.
right,
No,
and
and then that's a volunteer, the person that's doing that.
right.
So, but it's starting the conversation. But the insurance piece of it is not as big of an issue as we might have thought it was.
What do you see, Tom, and or John probably also, as the best venue for really having this discussion in a more meaningful way? Because having these things at select board meetings is great, but as we well know, these folks are all here, and we're glad you're here, but they're here for a different reason. Just because this is on the select board agenda doesn't bring anybody in. Do we need to have a significant and well advertised public meeting? Do we, how do we go about creating a conversation about this that people are actually going to hear?
My opinion, strictly based upon previous experience and exposure, is we start off with the Public Safety Committee, and what that starting grid is like, I don't know. That could be laid out at the first time we get together. But there's going to be a decent amount of time spent getting all those people up to speed on some history, where we stand now, why, and some challenges that are facing us, short term and long term. And then at whatever point, it's, yeah, certainly having public meetings, we're gonna have to. You know, and within that, perhaps we're gonna collectively come up with some things and some options, that none of us had thought of before. So some things we might wanna enact / make attempts at, see how things start to work out and just keep going forward.
The thought that's occurring to me actually isn't, I mean, about this problem, which is a real problem in just our aging community. But volunteerism in general in town, how hard it is to get. I mean, I'm obviously working at Putney Cares as well.
Yeah,
And our board is just, I mean, it's tiny and dedicated, but
right.
I wonder if as part of this whole mix of things, we couldn't have some opportunity for all of us who are looking for board volunteers to deliver Meals on Wheels, Conservation Committee, whatever all, there couldn't be some, I mean, in high schools you do fairs, and I'm not thinking of a fair, but some sort of an event that might invite all of us who are looking to have volunteer opportunities. Because there may be people who would think they wanted to be in the fire department who actually should be delivering Meals on Wheels or driving people to medical appointments or whatever all else.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a huge, or, you know, hauling stuff out of the beaver swamp, whatever all.
I think a fair would be a good idea. Because we have the all boards, well, we haven't since I've been
Oh, I
here.
love those. I love
Yeah,
it
and
when
we
that
need
happens.
we need to do that again, but I think a lot of people might feel better about going and not have to listen to, they might be interested in 1 or 2 tables of information,
Yes.
but not listen to every single, I don't know, I think that would be a good
We
idea.
wouldn't do it so much as spiels, but more like people coming in and just checking
Yeah,
things
checking
out.
things out, what interests them and talking to the people and, I don't know. that
I
would-
always find the all boards meetings totally energizing. I'm so excited about everything that's going on in town. And I feel like I know, but I don't know anything. There's so much going on. And
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think that in some ways that sort of dovetails right into sort of almost community building
Yes.
and you know, I mean, I feel like Putney has a good, strong community,
Yes.
but I'm not sure that people, I think you're very right in saying, you know, people don't necessarily know the venue
it's a
they
little
should be in.
siloed.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think that without a captive audience, it's gonna be hard to
Yes.
get people to show up for something. You know, I mean, I don't know whether, you know, maybe the community suppers or maybe
Right.
something like that where you know people are gonna be coming anyway, and start having tables there regularly or something along, you know,
Something.
basically a town-wide volunteer recruiting program because, you know, as we all know, there are a limited pool of people who tend to step up again and again and again, and those are a great group of people, but you can only ask so much from so many people.
And they
I,
tend to age, which is another.
yeah. You've noticed that? And I don't think it's necessarily a lack of willingness amongst a younger crowd. It's a lack of, again, you know, as with fire department or anything else, recruitment and retainment. And I think again, you're very right about finding the right slots for people that might work well. So I think we should think about what that venue might be, because I think if we sort of say, let's have a fair, come on out and volunteer, we'll get the usual faces and maybe a few others, but probably not a lot. So maybe we just have to be a little more creative with how we're thinking about getting
Well, around the
to
edge
those
of the harvest
people.
dinner might be one, for example.
Yeah.
It's gotta be that
Yep.
kind of a thing.
Yep,
That's in the lantern meal at the school because
that's what you're talking about.
Well, you
right?
mean the harvest at the Putney
Well,
School
I
one or
don't
the one?
called it that, the
Oh,
the school.
The lantern supper.
Okay, yeah.
No, I think that would be a
Which
good
is-
idea, because that's the crowd that is probably willing and isn't necessarily plugged in a way that they could be, so that might be, I
Mhm.
mean, that's coming up soon, it wouldn't allow for a lot of planning, but
Yeah.
but maybe.
It's a long-term issue, it's not a short-term.
Yeah, no, but it, you know, it might be worth seeing whether we could get a table there for this year just to start the short-term aspect of it and then, you know, maybe build on that somehow, but. So we solved all your problems, right, Tom?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. We're good to go.
So the plan is to, within the next few weeks, have a
Yeah.
public safety committee meeting.
In the next, yeah, well, I guess
You
we'll.
said mid-September.
I said mid-September, yeah. I'm trying to think through, let's see, we got one more week. No, we don't even have one more week this month.
The third week in September.
Third, yeah, because when's the BCA, the last one, the 22nd?
22nd.
22nd, right. That's a Tuesday. Yeah, so I'll put
The
something
third
out,
week in
I'll put something out
September.
for the next couple days. And I think we've been shooting for Mondays in the past, which I'll try and do again, Monday evenings. No, is that bad?
Training night.
Oh, right.
Will you be coming to the public safety committee meeting?
Yeah, I would,
I didn't know if the first one, yeah, okay.
yeah,
So, all right, well, you guys can work that out.
yeah.
Just remember, it needs to be posted, warned, minutes,
How many, how much time?
48 hours.
48 hours, okay. Okay. Yep,
You got it all figured out.
we'll see. We've been bumping
There
it, I
needs to
mean,
be a September meeting.
Right.
It just, I mean, we keep talking about having this meeting and
between the meetings here and at and meetings at the school, this is when
Yeah.
it gets tough, but we'll fit something in.
yeah. Are we good? With that topic right now?
To start
Exactly.
the conversation. Good.
Great, thanks a lot. 30 weeks, temporary. All right, are we missing anything here? Your donated land discussion?
You can do that now, 'cause I don't know if they all want to hear about how I'm gonna do a chart of accounts for the highway fund.
Right.
Interesting.
It's really exciting, but
So this is the fourth meeting, even though it doesn't mean, it says 4 or 4, but we can have more.
And we'll have more.
And we'll have more. And up to this point, there's been 2 people that have expressed some interest, one being the dog park. And then I think it's both through the Conservation Committee and some others talking about the possibilities, or what possibilities are there, whether it should be mapped out. And there's cemetery possibilities also, or thoughts also. So it's open to the floor, people who have ideas or,
I would just, Louise Garfield is the chair, but she did speak to you about trails oriented toward kids. Was that it? She said, I just spoke to her informally. She said a long time ago. This would have been months ago.
Yeah, I don't.
She was interested in some kind of trail kids could walk and do things along the trail that would introduce them to certain natural kinds of things. She was thinking of coming but didn't come, and she would be more articulate about that than I certainly am.
right, and I've spoken actually with her a little bit too, and I think some of it was making an extension from the Putney School Forest, going through over by Bear Hill somewhere, connecting up that way. Someone had mapped it out. I think.
Yeah, Bruce Whitney.
Bruce
Yeah.
Whitney had
Yeah.
mapped
Oh,
it out.
okay.
Yeah.
He had mapped out a trail system that connected
Right.
all of it, yeah. So that was presented to me.
But I know one of the things also though is, almost as a precursor to all this, is someone else mentioned finding an Antioch student who might be willing to map out the whole area. I mean, we don't really know what's there as far as flora and fauna and all of that, so.
Excellent.
Antioch or Marlboro or, any.
Yeah,
Some environmental type.
University of Vermont also has an internship program which does mapping.
Is that right?
Yeah, the Earthbridge Land Trust is currently engaging both Antioch and UVM
Huh.
to get student interns, so that it's a semester-long project, so if it's something
Mhm.
you want to do, you apply and
Was there
respond.
Earthbridge property or also?
Right next to
Trust
Well,
next
why
to
don't
it?
you- Yeah.
Yeah, there's already Earth, is that you guys,
That's
right?
us.
Yeah.
Julie, why don't you go next? You know.
Well, of course, we've been next to that property for a very, very long time. We're sorry to see the invasion of buckthorn, as we are everywhere. That's not an exception, but it's quite remarkable up there after clear cutting that happened a while ago. Thanks to you guys, and our household did tracking this winter, so I now actually have a much better sense of the number of animals that are moving back and forth across the road into that property than I would ever have done had I not been convinced by these guys to go out and do that. There is a fair amount of movement of, you may have this stuff with you.
I do.
Clearly there are a lot of deer there, but we also saw a mink at one point. What else did we get, guys?
Wow.
A lot of foxes, not surprising, but mink was cool. I think I can't speak for either my spouse or my brother-in-law, but I think there's some things we would like not to see happen. We would like it not to become noisy. We would like it not to be clear cut. We would like it to be conserved, to become part of conservation land in this town in one way or another. I'm very taken with Bruce's notion of, you know, anytime we can extend a corridor, you know, that's good for critters, it's good for people. So his trail plan really appealed to me a lot. I don't know about the rodent kids in particular, but certainly people who are biking and hiking and so forth could easily get across Route 5 there and have a bigger loop, which is always a nice thing to have. I thought Honey's idea about the dog park was really intriguing. I don't have any sense what that would look like. It sounds like a lot of fencing to me. As someone who's done fencing in her life, I can't really imagine doing it, but she's a character. She might pull it off. So that I wouldn't be opposed to that. But it seems like some of those things could happen in conjunction. I think if there's going to be a lot of parking up there, real thought would have to be given to parking lots and so forth, if people were bringing their dogs in and parking.
Well, along with that too, someone mentioned to me that would fencing interfere with wildlife movement?
Well, that's why it would have to be very thoughtfully done.
Yeah.
You couldn't. I think it's important not to interfere with the wildlife movement if we can. I mean, anytime we get an opportunity to do that. We know that moose and bear move across our property. So we would like to see, those corridors kept open. They're heading down to the river in the spring. So I'll now be quiet.
As a guy would, some thoughts. One is our property has a good turnoff, Small Meadows Lane. And I have a theory that a lot of people want to see rural Vermont, so they get off the interstate and they come up to our house. And they turn around, they've seen rural Vermont, and they go back. Honestly, it's like they want to get off the highway, they want to see, and they've seen rural Vermont. I think that goes on. And the idea of having some open space where you could pull in, probably get used by people like that, which is fine. An observation I've made is Dummerston has this state pull-off, rest stop, and it seemed to work really well. They don't get much trash. It's got a nice shaded area to pull off. People do. I think people just want to break sometimes for whatever reason. And on the other hand, at the top of Bear Hill, you get a lot of beer cans and things like that. And I think the difference is one's in view of the road, and the other is where you can go for parties or wherever, and just leaves a lot of litter. And again, I'm impressed how simple, and not that there isn't some investment, and not that there isn't a really great shelter there, but just the pull off that's again in view of the road seems to work well. Where, like, they don't even have a trash can out there for litter, but it takes care of itself. So that it's there's various proposals, and I think if they develop it, certainly consider them, but those are just a couple
Mhm.
observations.
Tom Hoskins. Of course, I can't remember names, but not, several years ago, maybe 15, I was talking in the office with a Presbyterian minister who was rather elderly. He'd come back to the community. He'd grown up here. And he talked about that hill, that the kids, of course, that time it was cleared from hay and sheep, and how they would go up to sled down. And from the top, this incredible, which is true, the incredible view down the valley. Now, this is before 91. You go up there today, except that there's a lot of trees, and there's noise. But instead, really, the view is quite something. So it's been, I get the sense from, such as that gentleman, a community place, a sense that this is part of, doesn't belong to somebody specifically to build a house on. It's a community place. And if it can in some way join the other Putney properties that are reserved, it's just a tremendous gift for the future. Because, these, depending on the economy, these places are going to disappear, and the farming is already gone, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a real value. I remember some years ago a number of years ago, when we pulled into the Dummerson little park there to have a sandwich. And lo and behold, there was a state employee who was going to charge us $4. So of course we left, but the point being that they have a staff. And if this were going to work, we would need, again, volunteers, because we're not going to find paid people to do this, who would help check the area for trash and to keep it, if it looks good, it's more likely to stay looking good. And once these places go over, then it's easier. It's a decent, I mean, the property up there is poor. The soil is poor, always has been. I think this is one of the reasons except for down by the river, this is East Putney, always poor, and the rest of Putney does pretty well. And I think it has to do with the soil. So initially, and you're not going to see that change. The forest was just trashed, whatever it was 20 years ago. Just no water bars were done in any of and just a lot of thoughtless cutting, but that's come back quite a bit. I think Lynn Levine has been through there and has seen some of that. So again, I think thoughtfulness, bringing in conservation, it's really a resource, I think, not necessarily certainly for my time, but for my grandkids and their kids' time, because it's so easy to give away. I always regret that when the church was selling its property down on River Road, that there wasn't some way to make that a community resource, but they needed cash. And so I'm very much in favor in some way or another of preserving that. It doesn't have to be fancy, but just with respect.
Yeah, I would guess you all probably, I mean, I've walked on it briefly, but it's not particularly familiar land to me, and I'm sure you all are much more familiar with its attributes and detriments as far as what's nice about it and what isn't. I mean, I think a number of people have talked about how beautiful that top piece is, and I walked in that direction and didn't find what came across as a beautiful top piece, and I don't know whether I started getting in the thicket of buckthorn and that was that, but it's nice getting up to there. But it's pretty bony in there too. I mean, there isn't a lot of soil. There's a lot of rocks. So yeah, exactly. But it might be nice to try and figure out how to utilize that top piece. I think that would be a question of sensitivity to it, because what we don't want to create is a destination for those who are going to dump their beer cans
Well, the
around.
same thing, just.
We have them all over. There's pockets everywhere where there are the hot spots for that kind of thing. So sort of how we figure out not to have that be the case. Important.
Well, just talking about the soil and so on, I think if you're going to do an inventory, you do want to look, especially if you're considering a cemetery,
Yes, perfect.
you want to know how much soil
Right.
you have.
Yeah. No, that was,
This isn't like down in the river valley where you have the
Right.
terraces of basically, like sand and silt, and it's really easy to
yeah,
dig a grave. I hate to say this, but this is what we're
Yeah.
talking about.
no, and we actually, that's a discussion, one of the discussions we have had is finding out what the statutory requirements are for cemeteries, and also finding out what basically whether that land, the topography of it and geology of it contributes at all to that. And we don't really know
Yeah.
yet, so.
Some of it was rated good for septic, so that's closer to the road, so that's a
One would assume that might be, yeah.
But the hiking trails, I haven't seen the view either, also having got stuck in the mud.
Mm.
So, just a trail up to the top and back down might be nice with a pull-off, which you can see from the road, so maybe it's not like the Bear Hill, end of the road kind of thing.
Yeah, I wonder, is there, I mean, I guess it would have to be volunteer, but maybe there is a way soon to initially just get a trail from the road up to the top so that people could at least start to visit and kind of get an idea of what's there. I think that's part of the problem, is people just don't really know exactly where they're at.
The trails are overwhelmed with buckthorn right now.
Right.
That's, it was an open logging trail, and so that's opportunistic,
Yeah.
buckthorn jumps right in there. And I think also an area was cleared for a view at one point, maybe, and I think that's what Scott remembers when he
Yeah.
talks about the
Yeah.
view.
I guess
But
there was a
now,
little
of course,
cabin up there.
again, there was
at
no
some point.
buckthorn
In the
control,
cabin.
so
Yeah.
all the trees were cut down. And what's gonna grow there?
Buckthorn.
Buckthorn.
Right.
So I would, first of all, I think if we dealt with the buckthorn problem, you might have a trail, logging trails that reappear.
Right.
So I think the buckthorn is a top priority kind of issue. Also, you're in current use, I think, with your forest. Other people who own property that abuts sort of more to the back of it, do log. And I know Bill Gunther, if buckthorn's a real problem, will not allow you to cut anything until you've taken
Or
care
be
of it.
very selective. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
that's sort of how it's done. The other thing is, and I don't know whether as a municipal property it would be eligible for this, but the NRCS does programs for buckthorn control, for invasives control in general.
Right.
And,
And-
that would be a possibility, and certainly Chuck Armstrong,
Right.
Bill Gunther would know about that
Right.
stuff.
And you can get that, if you have a plan, a forestry plan, and you're going to log.
Right.
You can also get it if you're going to manage for wildlife.
Right, no, I know.
Same
I'm not
thing.
saying for logging, I'm just saying for buckthorn. Yeah, I mean,
I'd love to get a grant.
I'm taking advantage of it myself because it's it's federal money that's available. I have terrible buckthorn, and I started on a program about 3 years ago to try and at least start to manage it. And it's nice to be able to get some federal funding
Yeah.
to do that, because otherwise it's hard to do.
Right. I think that's,
I don't know whether
That would
for
be great.
municipal property, I'm not sure
Because
whether that's available or not.
the Conservation Commission is also all volunteers, and we've done a lot of invasives removal, and we're continuing, but we're gonna be open.
And the problem is when you look at that kind of scale,
It's impossible, yeah.
it's really hard. I mean, what the NRCS program is basically aimed at is knocking down a significant portion of it so that then you can perhaps work towards managing it, and that's very helpful in that situation.
It's a
So
very good idea.
we could explore that a little bit.
Could return the area to what it was 100, 150 years ago, ruminant pasture now for goats.
Yeah, that would take a different kind of management. That would be great. It would also be, it might make sense to do, like that top part of it or something. And I think, the timber that's on it, at least what I walked through, is not great. I mean, there's some harvestable stuff in there, but not a lot.
I think that took pretty.
Somebody went through it not too long ago and
They-
took most of it. Yeah.
He did, I mean,
Do you know how long ago that was or not?
It was probably
really no?
at
Right,
least
no.
15, 17 years
Do you
ago.
think it was that much? Because it looked to me like it might not have
The
been. And
soil
maybe there are
is
certain areas
terrible.
that might be it
It
too.
had stretched down into the property that leads towards Landmark.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
it was for many years brutal, and it's really grown back to a surprising degree.
Yeah.
And buckthorn will suppress sapling
Oh,
regeneration,
I know.
That's
so
right.
that's
Believe
the other
me,
problem.
Yeah. Yep.
Also limits soil loss runoff.
Yeah.
Speaking in favor of buckthorn, I can't imagine I'm doing that, but
You,
Yeah.
I think another way to look at it in terms of any of these solutions is, again, how do we want the place to look in 100 years? And is what can we do now, which might not be pretty. I mean, we might be removing a bunch of trees, approaching ways of buckthorn, for example, so that some other time in the future, it might look pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I also had some information to present about, on behalf of wildlife and perhaps hunters, I'm not sure. I actually did track this little section 3 times over the winter. And this is our tracking program to see which roads animals are crossing. Usually we're supposed to track 5 times, and this was just an add-on, so I didn't do it. But we did have gray fox, red fox, 1 fisher, we had deer. Let's see if I want to make sure and the number of crossings were, this is per night, 4 to 6 crossings per night, back and forth. So that's, it's not overwhelming, but it's also fairly active kind of road crossing situation. It gives you a sense of what animals might be utilizing. We've also heard that there are bear, which we don't get in the winter, crossing anything,
Yeah.
and moose. So that starts to give a sense of who might be there. And I sort of had, this is for fun, I did up this little chart from a couple sources for folks. And this is how much acreage or square miles are required by different animals. And I threw in turkeys for fun. This is just for the individual animal or a pair, like foxes generally come in pairs. They're usually mated up, they mate for life. Like the turkeys will be, the hen will be with her brood, or the hens will hang out together. Deer, the female deer tend to go in small little herds. So that's the kind of need for those sort of ongoing kinds of activities and lifestyle by these different animals for just one family group, one individual, if it's an individual, if you've got a bobcat, because that's how they are in the world. And I've made some notes from DeGraff and Yamasaki about, for instance, the black bear. You've got the female bear establishing a territory, and that's what the size of that territory relates to. But the male bears are roaming about in an area much larger than that. And then beyond this level, I just stuck in this little bit of how much do they need, Vermont's Natural Heritage little chart here. This would be not only dealing with the family group, but how much do you need for a viable species population? In other words, your red fox got run over, I don't know if you noticed. Yeah, at the end of the winter. One member of that pair. So the remaining member of that pair is going to link up with some other fox. It could be, if say the female were left, she could end up just linking up with her son. If she can't move to find, or another male can't move to find her from a different area. So then you're going to start to have inbreeding. And so talking about viable populations of a species gets even bigger. I mean, it's just sort of like these acreages are sort of like, come on, how the heck do you do that? So maintaining even minimal linkages is, I think really important. So there could be a pull-off from the road that was visible from the road, but then leave another section, preferably one with trees and cover on the other side of the road, that animals still could use without feeling they were going into a really open, vulnerable, or threatening kind of area. That would be one suggestion. Or, at least maintaining maybe 1,200 feet back in, so that your trail or viewpoint or your parking lot might be a little further in. But if you want it viewed from the road, it would be sort of like splitting the area. And then I just wanted to point out why this particular connection is important. conservation areas are obviously undeveloped forested areas for the zoning districts. And this is the East Putney Ridge, East Putney Basin conservation zone in here. And it's all privately owned around the edge. And so the hunter access, I think, is key. We want to make sure they can still get into here, because they're really hunting in these big parcels back in here and in these backyards. And it's pretty good hunting. We get bear hunters, deer hunters. I think we probably have some coyote hunters. I'm a little iffy about that, but. And then, so here's the Bear Hill Conservation District, which everybody knows. And so, and this really isn't that developed. This area right here, this, what is it? This is resource, I think, area. And so here's Small Meadows. Here's where folks live, right in here. Here's the piece of land right here. And so the animals are crossing, you know, trying to connect those two major conservation zones.
Right.
And then the parcel itself, which is right, I think this is it right
Yeah,
here.
it is. Yeah.
The back part is part of this whole area. And the Vermont Fish and Wildlife has deemed this a major habitat block, you know, or a fairly important one. Bear Hill is more important to them. And so the actual acreage is part of this 1,000, it's about this area as a habitat block is about 1,100 acres. So you can sort of connect that up with the data. You could support a little group of deer, you could support some turkeys.
Right.
But most of these animals, and even the deer don't stay. I mean, the deer are crossing here, and the deer, well, deer cross many places, but even though you say to them, look, you've got enough acreage right here, they're not necessarily staying right there, especially if you've got an apple tree. So I just wanted to point out some of those considerations of keeping wildlife in mind. And I think many of the things that have been suggested are very compatible with that. Even a cemetery could work. It just depends on how you cite it. And the pull-up, again, it would work as long as it's how you cite it and what you, just keeping these issues in mind. And most wildlife corridors that I've heard of are 1,200 feet of sort of, I don't know how they came up with this number, but I just pass it along and I could get more data later if you need it. So that's all I wanted to say on behalf of the animals.
No, I think that's really helpful, and I don't know what the frontage is on the road there.
It's about a
It's
quarter
pretty
of a mile.
significant, yeah, it's a
okay.
lot.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think it's about a quarter of a mile.
so it leaves a lot of options, right? So I guess the next step with all this
I
is,
think the next step is a public meeting that's just
Mhm.
this discussion.
Mhm.
Because we've had this 4 times.
Right.
We've had, this is the most, well, no, Honey came once, and,
Mhm.
you know, we've had a little bit, you know, people have come in and talked to all of, or they've talked to each one of us a little bit, but I think maybe a broader discussion, that more people might, I don't know, I mean,
Right.
we can.
I would say before
or
we did that,
we do some research on some of the
I was
things
gonna
that you're talking
say,
about.
we should probably have some data to present at that, which, I mean, you know, Ann obviously has this data, but, for example, timber value,
Yeah.
trail possibilities, things like that.
Well, is it workable? I mean, could you cite a cemetery there?
Exactly,
Well-
find out
Is
those
that-
things.
Well, this is part of the volunteerism thing that we're talking
Right,
about.
right.
At the last meeting, when we talked about the cemetery, I think that the cemetery commissioners should be researching this.
Sure.
So I have asked to be on the agenda of the next meeting, which I thought was gonna be this week, and it hasn't gotten pulled together, but, so, you know, and then as far as, you know, meeting, I know that Deb had a suggestion, was it a forester that we were,
We should have a
Mhm.
Yeah,
forester
so
evaluate it.
it's
Yeah.
pulling all that together and finding the time to gather the data, so anybody that wants to
we have a-
offer up a section
in on
of that would be helpful, because I just, between the 3 grants we're working on and the budget season is about to
So
come up.
Bruce Whitney stood forward to help out with this, that would be good.
Yeah, did you just volunteer him?
Yeah, I think he's the man, and I know he's not doing anything for Earthbridge right now, so.
I mean, it's just little pieces and parts, like all these things I have on a list of things that we kind of need to, you know, one of them is just getting a survey done.
Yeah,
Right.
You know, we need to get the property surveyed so that when there are people, we are up there, or we know where our boundaries are, so that we're not thinking that, you know,
But you guys initiate that, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And we've also had the discussion that if there was some survey tape posted around up there, it would draw a lot more attention than it does
Right.
currently. So there would be pros and cons to that, but
Yes.
you know, it's amazing what a little survey tape
Yeah.
does to get people excited about something, you know.
I guess my feeling would be is to gather that information over the next 3 or 4 months. I mean, we're not doing anything with it tomorrow. Nobody's made any commitments to do anything. I know Honey, you know, she's very patient in this process. She's not pushing it, or, you know, one of the things I did write down to talk to her about was, I'll have her do some research on how fencing and wildlife in these other parks that she's been to have. So that's a note I kind of made to have her, to tell her that's a concern, that maybe she could help do a little research on that. And then maybe have something, you know, in the winter here, and then we'll talk about it at town meeting, obviously. I don't think we're going to be ready at town meeting to say, these are the 3 things we want to do. Maybe we will, I don't know, but you never
Maybe,
know. And it may be absolutely
Or
clear.
these are some of
some
the
ideas,
ideas we're
yeah.
having, yeah.
There's a call, trying to contact a state forester, it takes months, they're
Yeah.
really busy, so if you were to give them a date.
Sooner rather than
Yeah.
later,
they
yeah,
might be able to
yeah.
work with you.
Yeah.
Just one other question in terms of another group that may be of interest too, I guess. When we first came to VAST, the Vermont area snowmobile trails were through there, and
Yes.
they've now subsided. But also hunters, not Uzis necessarily, but bow and arrow, or well, there might be other alliances that could help in terms of conservation or preservation or expanding areas that that also might be interested parties to help protect this in some way.
We did have someone talk to Scott, I think it was, he brought it up. I don't know.
About
who it was,
hunting.
About hunting. They had a serious concern about it being shut off.
Lost as,
Yeah,
yeah.
To
you
that.
can't, yeah, they really can't access that conservation district, you know, that good hunting area, because all along Warden Road, you've got houses, and they don't want to walk through someone's yard. Someone on Warden Road just posted property that wasn't posted before. I don't post mine, and they can still get in there, but that guy who posted is right next to my property, so I think they're maybe confused about entering on Warden Road anywhere. It used to be wide open from Warden Road into that area. So I think that's a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention, in terms of Bear Hill Conservation Site, we're not even supposed to put trails in there at all, of any kind, because it's deer wintering. We do have a trail, we're trying to get it, we're going through a process of maybe getting it approved. But snowmobiles are definitely out,
Right.
even though they're up there, according to the Act 250 decision. So I just pass that on.
Now, one other idea I had, and this may be the wrong crowd to bring it up with, but I'm just interested in an opinion. You know, one thing that occurred to me is a parcel for Habitat for Humanity. And I don't know whether there's anywhere on the property that sort of would make sense for that. You know, there's the area that I guess, what is it? You know, there's the road that goes off at the far end of it, and I think it abuts that road, doesn't it?
You
Does the
mean
property?
It's,
There's
You
the
mean
private, Earl's Way.
Well, that building, there's a
the white building for
a
sale
white,
right
that
now.
white building.
Oh, that's
between there.
before it?
Yeah.
Oh, it is, okay. I just wondered whether there was, you know, somewhere we might think about something like that. So,
That's such a good idea.
you know, if something like that, something to think about.
I don't know if that property's in, but that is a terrific idea.
I think it would be nice. I mean, if we, you know, somewhere where it could be discreet and yet a nice location for somebody, and, you know, a possibility.
There.
Such a nice peaceful town to live in, why wouldn't we want people to come? I mean, the discussion of affordable housing always comes up, but, you know, the reality is that that is not well suited for that because of access for town, you know, basically village infill. So habitat is a possibility that would sort of be along those lines, but.
If you do that, then I would say let's, you know, cluster it near where there already are some of the housing.
Perhaps, yeah, no, and that's what I don't know enough about whether, I mean, maybe up on that north end of it or closer to you guys, not to infringe on your
There's an
privacy,
old
but,
road
you know,
that
whether
came
there's
up
somewhere in there.
across
that-
our property and goes
Right up.
right up to the top. It's right there, that's the way, that's how you do it.
That's your continuation of Small Meadows Lane?
No, we've sort of
Something
ignored
else?
it, not really, but it's a
Oh,
point is
right.
that there is
You
a,
see him
is
before we leave, of course.
was a road, steep.
Huh.
steep,
Is that
not-
after
not
Scott's?
accessible, but
Mhm.
up to the top.
After Scott's place?
Yes,
And
just
then
keeps
on
going
out
up,
to the
right.
Route 5 on the other end.
I mean, I don't know how you do that, but that's the access. When it was all one property,
Parcel.
that's how it
Yeah.
happened.
So that was originally part
Oh,
of the
yeah.
same property,
That's
was
all
it? Oh, I didn't
Cornell
realize that.
Farm.
Huh,
Well, when you look at the survey, that's made up of, it was Governor so-and-so's piece originally.
yeah,
And then the
Yeah.
piece that Wyndham College bought was made up of 4 or 6 other parcels. It's surprisingly broken up and put back together a number of times.
yeah,
And so when it was purchased from the college to the bank, and then the bank was, Land Trust purchased it from the bank, that hill was not part of it. The Hendricks family retained it. And, but, you know, historically, I'm sure that was part of the pasture.
Oh, sure.
Mm.
Edith Gassett talked, we knew people in town who lived there when it was all one big sheep farm.
open, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah,
Boy, it must have been pretty, eh?
yeah, stunning, I
Yeah.
think, but desperately poor as well.
I'm sure, yeah, yeah,
Those
and
were tough
hard
times.
on the land as well to, you know, not
Yeah.
have coverage, but, all right.
All right, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah,
for
really
your-
appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Take care.
So Tom's here because we want to talk about a personnel issue in executive session, but, so, I mean, he's
We could
welcome
do
to
that.
stay here anyways, but
Well, we could do that now.
well,
That-
I
that's
think
up
we
to you.
have like 5 minutes of the other
Oh.
stuff.
You got 5 minutes? Yeah.
All right, then the highway fund discussion.
So I'm going to briefly talk about this, but I'm gonna bring it up at another meeting because Scott was the one that really kind of, when I brought this up before, and this is talking about segregating the highway fund from the general fund. As Brian and I keep going over things and talking about his budget and how to plan for the future, and that this keeps coming up, and it may be time for us to segregate it. I know Scott had some feelings about it when I brought it up before, and I want to just kind of revisit with him what his hesitation was with doing that. But we also, so at the next meeting, I'll put it on there again. I will show you what it would look like if we did that.
And the upside of doing it would be sort of cleanliness of accounting, is that the
Yeah.
idea?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really difficult when we sit down, especially when we have grants that we're administering for different projects. Really difficult to maneuver what he has in his budget, what's left, where we're at with things. Does he need to slow down in one area? Because there's money coming in, but it's all mixed in with the general fund right now. So when we start to sit down and do it, we have to sit down and basically handwrite, okay, we know we have this, we know. Whereas if we had it segregated, we print a report, this is where we're at, this is the money that's coming in, this is what's been spent, this is what we're obligated for. And there is a part of it that because him and I have been aggressively going after some of the grants more than has been done in the past, some of the smaller ones as well as the larger ones, he's using a lot of our labor and equipment to do some of the work, so we actually end up with a surplus in that grant. And he would like it to stay with the highway fund instead of rolling into the, I know. smart of him.
Do other towns,
Yeah.
particularly larger towns, I imagine, do this?
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I talked to the accountant about it for the last couple of days. Him and I have kind of gone back and forth, and he sees it, you know, in maybe 50-50, I don't know, depends on where you are. What it does do is it makes it really clear how much it costs to run the highway department, because, and the one thing Brian didn't quite understand was when you pull out the budget for the highway, you're pulling out all the benefits associated with it, which he's never really captured in his
Right.
math when we're
Right.
doing it.
Right,
And then the other part of it is what if that fund ends up with a deficit?
right. Who's responsible?
Who's responsible? Whereas
Right.
before, when we knew we were running short because we had a bad winter, we
Siphon
could say
some
to
money
this
there,
department,
right.
you know,
Yeah.
look, we gotta slow down over here, or we can't do this because this needs it. Whereas if it's separate, it's separate. And you don't start borrowing money from one fund to the other. Well, I mean, you could with a vote, if there's surplus in one, you could, but it makes it a little more complicated to do that transfer without, which is not a bad thing, because then it's really transparent as to where we are.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's ups and ups. It's a lot of work to separate the two in the beginning. Once it's set up, it's fine. It's just a lot of work in the beginning to try to segregate all of it. I don't think that we would really want to start the process of tracking the expenses in this new fund until July 1st, the new fiscal year. But we need to make the decision because the budget would need to be voted on separate for the next fiscal year.
Great.
So during budget season is when we really have to
Right.
make that decision.
Yeah,
So at the next meeting, I'll have the report, I'll show you what it'll look like, what the budget would look like. And Scott will be there, talk with him. But we do need to, back in June, we talked about the paving for Kimball Hill. And we were using 13,000 that was left over in the retreatment line for FY14, as well as the reserve that had carried forward for materials. But I never had you vote on that reserve from FY14, the 13,000 that was left.
senior
We
motion.
talked about it. So
Yeah, I remember.
this is the dollar amount. That's exactly what's left in that line. So we're gonna
Senior motion.
to reserve that. Yeah.
To reserve it?
To reserve it for FY14, so that I can use it to pay for this, because
So-
FY14 is closed.
So moved.
All right, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Because when you say the benefits have to go over to, do you mean the percentage of the benefits for the hours that would go? I mean, because a percentage of all of their hours would go over to the highway fund, is it?
All of their hours would go.
Oh,
over
all
there.
of their hours?
Yeah,
I see,
because
okay.
they're only,
It would just be, it would almost, for all practical purposes, it would function as a little mini municipality kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right,
It would
okay.
just be
I see.
completely,
Oh, okay.
it would have its own general fund as opposed to
yeah,
being mixed with ours.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I wasn't sure if they did other non-highway related stuff, but that's, okay. It's
No.
all highway.
it would all be
Mhm.
highway. And then, there would be another tax rate too. That would be a change for people.
Oh, because it, huh,
Because you're voting a separate budget.
Oh,
And when
yeah,
when you bill the taxes, actually the highway gets all of their money.
Mhm.
The town is always left with just like the school always gets all of their money,
Yeah.
and the town is left with the delinquents.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's a question of, I mean, when I did this in Guilford, they switched, they segregated everything, and we had to come to a decision, which it was a little different down there because they had been kind of tracking it separate on the side, what they thought their fund balance was for the highway.
Mhm.
And I said to Brian today, if we start at zero, you guys are at zero, you know, even though we have a surplus in the general fund, I can't tell you how much of that
Right.
accumulated over the years from highway surplus.
No, I
So-
think you start with a clean slate and
Yeah.
see where it goes to. And, you know, I mean, I would have to imagine that in the short run anyway, there would be some issues that would have to be ironed out. but-
Yeah. I think the biggest question for me is that question of the deficit. Because
Right. If they end up with a deficit.
if they end up with
right.
if you end up with a shortfall in state highway money because the budget didn't
Mm-hmm.
pass at the state level and they're not funding it entirely of what we thought, and you have a bad winter,
Right.
you have a deficit, whereas
What do you
before
do?
we kind of had a little bit of wiggle room with it all
Right.
kind of combined to cover that in a good year and then in a
Right.
bad year and then in a good year, kind of offset it.
So that would almost fit into that category of, ability to borrow to offset.
Yeah,
It would almost have to be whether that would be part of the article to pass that budget or how. But
Yeah.
there would have to be a mechanism for either us to lend them money or for them to access
yeah.
loan money or whatever,
Yeah. And
I don't know whether that's inherent in the system anyway,
Yeah.
but if it wasn't.
I mean,
we'd
there is
have
a way to
figure
do
out
it,
a
and
way
we
to
do it all the time. Like
Right,
the
right.
sewer fund has a huge receivable, and the
You
cash, we pool the cash together,
Right.
so that's a different story, but, and then it tracks how much one fund owes the other, but. So, I don't know, I don't know what, yeah, like I said, I'll bring it up at the next meeting and, make sure that Scott's in on the discussion, because he did have some thoughts about it that I can't quite remember what he was.
Yep.
Warrants. And while you guys are signing those, I just wrote, I had on here this tire pile. You haven't heard anything about the tire pile on Old Route 5, right?
Not yet.
Okay. I haven't either.
But along with that, in reality, the last several weeks, I haven't been super diligent on it either, because there have been a number of things that have been coming up that just
Yeah.
have taken priority, so.
Yeah. And then they did walk through, Wyndham Regional coordinated the walkthrough.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, we went through the fire station, they came here,
Did you
and
get, did you
they
get any
are
sense of
working
what they were
on
thinking?
an assessment. But this is what I found out, was that for they're working on recommendations. So for the assessment of a project to see if the cost to benefit ratio would even work for some type of wood system, they will cover 75% of this grant will cover 75% of the cost, and the town pays 25%,
Just for the assessment?
just for the assessment. If the construction happens,
They
it's
don't cover
flipped.
anything?
They
Oh.
cover 25%
25%.
and the town is 75, so it's
Wow.
huge.
Although, in a building like the fire department, this year and last year not being a good example because of oil price costs,
Yeah.
but, we might find that the payback would be relatively short
Yeah.
on doing something
You
like
never
a
know.
pellet system. I mean, they tend to be, I've done several of them in residences now, and, it's often as short as 5 to 6 years, and then you're coming out ahead, and that's pretty significant. So, that boiler, one of the reasons we look at that in residences is if their heating system is aging. Obviously your boiler system is relatively new, so you'd have to take that into consideration. But, if the payback is short and then the long-term benefit is huge, it's
Yeah.
certainly worth looking at.
And then their timeline is they want to get the assessments kind of done. They're trying to get that suggestion for the assessment out there so that you can budget for the 25% and then start. So it's going to be a couple year process, really, I think, by the time that this whole thing is done. But one of the things we did learn while we were going through that, because they were asking us for numbers, was the water heater we put in the fire station.
Right.
Last year, between April and August, is that the time frame we used? I think we bought 500 and something gallons worth of oil. This year we've bought 220, something like that. And I think part of that was because we were low and they filled up at the end anyways. 'Cause
So
didn't use it.
but you put in an electric unit, one of the
The
geo source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And have you been able to track accurately the electric costs involved?
not really, because if you could see those bills.
It's minimal or
Oh, well,
or
we have
the
so
big-
much
the
credit
big-
on our GMP bills right
Oh,
now
well,
that,
good.
yeah.
Good.
Have we paid,
That'll
what was the
disappear-
last
that'll
amount we paid?
disappear
to-
next winter.
Yeah, it's all gonna catch up,
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
I mean, we pay the street light bill regularly, but I mean, if we had to send in like $50.
yeah. So the
Good.
credits that we're getting are,
That's
it'll
great.
be interesting.
That's what we were
Yeah.
hoping for.
Now, I know it's a bigger system at the school, but I imagine the fire station has to be fairly large. I mean, is this a completely different?
Nothing like the scale of that.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, this would be a sizable commercial boiler, but nothing like that. I also, given the headaches they've had up
Yeah.
there,
Right.
a whole different ballgame. I mean, I think,
Okay.
from my perspective, the wrong contractor involved in that, as far as the boiler installation was concerned, and then poor follow-up on controls, et cetera. So there's been a lot of headaches with that are not typical of the systems necessarily, especially in a, up there, you've got a lot of different zoning. I mean, you presumably have basically the
2 or 3.
office space and the bays, and that's probably it. You've got zoning, you've got air exchange, you got all sorts of stuff up there that
Right.
makes that whole system a whole lot more complicated.
Right.
So it's worth looking into.
All right. So, do you have
No?
anything else?
So
All
I'll
right,
make
so
a motion that we go into executive session
All right.
for the purpose of personnel discussion.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, I'll second that. So 6:59, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we'd like to invite Tom to stay
Tom.
and Cynthia to stay,
Okay,
and
and-
Laura's excused if she
Yeah.
Oh,
would
she
like to be.
panicked there for a minute. when you said that.
Unless she wants to.
Will you be making any public decisions?
No.